Bitcoin didn't start as a get-rich-quick scheme. It started as a simple question: can we create money that works like the internet, open, global, and always on? In traditional finance, trust sits in the middle: banks, payment processors, and rules that decide who can move money and when. Cash can be lost, banks can fail, and digital payments can be reversed. People wanted a system that didn't depend on a single gatekeeper. Online, anything can be copied. If money is just a file, what stops someone from duplicating it and spending it twice? The double spend problem is the core issue of digital cash. One digital coin can be copied endlessly unless there's a way to agree on a single truth. If you could pay two places at once with the same coin, money would break. Bitcoin's mission was to prevent that without needing a central referee. Banks normally solve this by sitting in the middle, verifying balances, and keeping the official ledger of who owns what. That middle layer also means permission, paperwork, approvals, business hours, and sometimes a no with no explanation. Centralized systems can freeze accounts or block transactions. For some people that's safety, yet for others it feels like fragile dependence. Then came the 2008 financial crisis. Markets crashed, fear spread, and confidence in the existing system took a serious hit. Big institutions collapsed or needed rescue. To many observers, it looked like the rules were different for banks than for ordinary people. In that climate, a 9-page PDF appeared online. It proposed a new kind of digital cash, peer-to-peer, without relying on trust in banks. Instead of a central authority, Bitcoin would let users send value directly, like email, computer to computer, across the world. The author used the name Satoshi Nakamoto. No verified identity, no interviews, just code, a design, and a promise of mathematics. Even today, Satoshi remains unknown. That mystery became part of Bitcoin's myth. The idea mattered more than the person behind it. Bitcoin's breakthrough was building a system where the network itself verifies transactions, removing the need for a trusted bank in the middle. Transactions are grouped into blocks, then linked together, forming a chain. Each new block builds on the last, creating a history that's hard to rewrite. Bitcoin's ledger is public. Anyone can audit it. Instead of secrecy, it relies on transparency and cryptography to prove ownership. In early 2009, the first block, called the Genesis block, was created. Bitcoin was officially alive, even if almost nobody noticed yet. New Bitcoins enter circulation through mining. Computers compete to solve puzzles, and the winner earns newly minted coins plus fees. The first block famously included a newspaper headline, hinting at why Bitcoin was created, a reaction to bailouts and broken trust. Governments injected money and support into failing institutions. Some saw it as necessary, others saw it as proof the system was unfair. When confidence drops, people worry about savings, inflation, and rules changing overnight. Bitcoin offered an alternative story: fixed supply. Bit by bit, the idea grew, a money system maintained by code and consensus, not by a single institution's promises. At first, Bitcoin was a hobby for cryptography enthusiasts, people who liked experimenting with new protocols and open-source projects. Early mining was simple. A normal laptop could find blocks. The reward was huge, but the coins had almost no real-world value. The first transactions were mostly tests, sending coins between early users to prove that the network worked exactly as designed. Soon, people built wallets and basic tools. The experience was clunky, but it showed Bitcoin could move value as easily as sending a message. Then came the awkward question: what is one Bitcoin worth? With no standard price, the market had to discover value from scratch. In 2010, someone famously bought 2 pizzas with 10,000 BTC. It sounded silly, but it proved Bitcoin could be used to buy something real. Years later, those pizzas became legendary. The story reminds everyone that early value is often invisible, and markets learn slowly. Bitcoin started to feel like more than code. It became a culture, memes, debates, and a community trying to define what it really meant. A few merchants began accepting Bitcoin directly, without banks. For the first time, it looked like an alternative payment rail. To make buying and selling easier, exchanges appeared. They turned Bitcoin into something tradable, with a visible price chart. As prices rose, curiosity exploded. More people watched, more money flowed in, and Bitcoin began its long history of booms and busts. With growth came complexity, wallet backups, private keys, hacks, and scams. The tech was powerful, but the learning curve was real. One exchange, Mt. Gox, became dominant, then collapsed after massive losses. It was a painful lesson. Bitcoin isn't the same as trusting an exchange. When exchanges fail, liquidity disappears. Coins may still exist on the blockchain, but access can vanish in an instant. Hacks and lost keys created horror stories. People learned the hard way that "not your keys, not your coins" is more than a slogan. Bitcoin's freedom comes with risk. It's permissionless, but it also means personal responsibility, security, backups, and discipline. At the same time, Bitcoin enabled new kinds of online commerce. Payments could be global and fast, without cards or chargebacks. Bitcoin also attracted illicit markets. Media coverage often focused on crime, even though the technology itself is neutral, like cash or the internet. Governments responded with scrutiny. Questions about taxes, identity, and consumer protection pushed Bitcoin into the regulatory spotlight. Over time, new rules appeared: compliance, reporting, and licensing. Bitcoin kept running, but the on-ramps became more formal. Through it all, volatility became Bitcoin's signature. Prices surged, crashed, and surged again, shaping a generation of believers and skeptics. Many started noticing cycles: hype, correction, rebuilding, and renewed interest. Each wave brought new users, new tools, and new arguments. Critics called it a bubble. Supporters called it adoption. Either way, Bitcoin kept surviving, long enough to force serious conversation. Bull markets created moonshot stories, people dreaming of life-changing gains. That excitement helped adoption, but also fueled reckless behavior. A global community formed around forums, conferences, and social media. Bitcoin became a shared language for money, freedom, and technology. In rallies, the narrative becomes simple: up only. But real markets are messy, and optimism can flip into fear very quickly. When prices run, FOMO kicks in. People rush to buy, sometimes without understanding the tech, the risks, or the history behind it. During congestion, fees rise and transactions slow. It's one of Bitcoin's trade-offs: strong security and decentralization can limit throughput. That sparked heated debates about scaling. Should Bitcoin prioritize being everyday payment money, or a secure base layer like digital gold? Some disagreements led to forks, splits in the network where rules diverge. It's messy, but it's also how open-source governance plays out. Over time, serious investors arrived. For them, Bitcoin looked less like a toy and more like a new asset class with unique properties. Companies built custody and infrastructure to hold Bitcoin securely. That reduced friction, but reintroduced a familiar idea: trusted intermediaries. Apps made buying Bitcoin feel effortless: tap, buy, done. Convenience boosted adoption, but it also made it easier for newcomers to overextend. Bitcoin hit major milestones and headlines worldwide. Each new peak brought celebration, skepticism, and the same question: what comes next? Even after more than a decade, Bitcoin still swings between fear and optimism. It's an experiment running in public, every single day. Whatever your opinion, the blockchain keeps producing blocks. Bitcoin's story is still being written, one block at a time.